5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Good morning and welcome to Council Committee of the Whole of June 9th. We have only one item on our agenda today, but we'll call this meeting to order. Under reports, item 2.1, community group funding. And I'll let Ms. Cajolet take this away.
Morning, thank you. Just give me 1 second.
No worries. Dylan, on a different note, I saw your disc golf Instagram. Looks like I golfed better than you last night.
Oh, that was the worst shot I've ever had in my life.
It was good.
I just wish the actual shot had been caught on camera, not the explanation of how terrible it was.
All right, looks like we are ready.
Thank you. So for the community group funding cycle for 2022-2023, there were 31 applications received. 7 of those were from new community groups that applied for funding. Obviously, the last year has been challenging due to COVID, so almost every application noted some impacts related to COVID, with community groups experiencing, in some instances, long-term facility closures, no different than the municipality, staff layoffs, and other things. And one of the largest, most notable challenges for them has been the inability for them to host fundraising events as they typically would. And for lots of our community groups, that revenue is generated mostly from donations, private organizations, fundraising sponsorships, and then their internally generated revenue for programming. So despite all of this, I commend each and every one of them. They have created amazing new ways to engage the community in the various types of programs and services that they offer. So for this funding cycle, the existing funding envelope was maintained, and the allocations will reflect that. Core funding has been recommended for identified groups, and those groups are groups that occupy a city facility, have an agreement with the city, or align with council priorities. So, for example, they may have a council member that sits on their board. So this is the suggestions, recommendations for operational grant funding for each year. You will see there's 2 columns in this table as opposed to the one in the administrative report. There was a calculation error in the first table. So although the total grant funding line has not changed, the allocations have slightly. So in order to maintain the existing funding envelope for 2022, admin has suggested a 1% decrease for the majority of applicants, with a few exceptions. So in order to support tourism and economic recovery through the region, administration is recommending maintaining the funding for Grande Prairie Regional Tourism Association at their 2021 level for the first year, and then giving them an increase for 2023. This is still less than their operating request. In 2021, Grande Prairie Sport Connection was funded at a higher rate than their actual request. So administration is recommending that their funding for this cycle be at the 2021 requested amount of $104,250 each year. Administration is also recommending increased funding for STARS at a rate that is slightly below their operating request, but definitely an increase. And then revised allocations will yield a slightly less than 1% decrease for the Grande Prairie Public Library. And allocations for the enhancement category, which will be the annual funding category, are recommended to be reduced at a rate of approximately 2% for 2022. There are a few groups that we received applications for that are not recommended for funding. So in that instance, as an example, the Legion has applied for funding, but the Sports Development, Wellness and Culture Department will work with them to advise of some other grant opportunities that may provide benefit to them instead of operational grant funding. Another example would be the Grande Prairie Intercultural Association. They would be encouraged to apply for arts development funding through that stream in 2022. So for 2023, the funding allocations equate to approximately a 3% reduction for most applicants and just over a 1% decrease for the Grande Prairie Public Library. Administration would also recommend allocation of the funds in the enhancement category change going forward, so that for 2023, no single grant would exceed $14,999. So the following is a summary of applied for capital funding as part of a 5-year capital plan to purchase a helicopter to be designated to the Grande Prairie base. So the Grande Prairie base was tasked to fundraise $4 million for this. And the organization has also received commitments of $500,000 over a 5-year term from the County of Grande Prairie, the MD of Greenview, Saddle Hills County, and they also have funding designated from Northern Sunrise County, Clear Hills County, and the MD of Fairview. So they certainly have reached to a number of partners. The South Peace Regional Archives request is for 2023, and that is to support the renovation and relocation of the archives from the current space at the Grande Prairie Museum to the Heritage Discovery Center at Center 2000. So for that organization, renovations would begin hopefully in January 2023. The applicant is also contributing funds to this project. They have requested funding from their municipal partners, as well as some federal and provincial grants. So the recommendations from administration are that Council approve the 2022-2023 operational funding as presented, approve the 2022-2023 community group funding allocations as presented, defer the 2022 and 2023 capital funding requests to 2022 budget deliberations in the fall. The fourth recommendation is that Council approve operational funding of $10,000 for Peace Wapiti Speed Skating Club from 2022 from the Arctic Winter Games Legacy Fund. This is a similar practice that we utilized last year. And then the final recommendation would be to approve allocation of the enhancement funding with a change that no single grant would exceed $14,999. And the intent behind doing that certainly is to designate that annual funding so that it would provide an opportunity for some new community groups to be able to apply for funding. So the alternative certainly could be that administration is directed to adjust the allocations for the 2022-23 funding cycle. Direction could be provided to adjust the recipients receiving core funding for the funding cycle, or Council could choose to receive this report for information. So as I mentioned, the allocations from the report and what is being considered today are just slightly increased. So that's, I feel, good news for everyone, despite the error. So I will bring up the adjusted spreadsheet. Okay, so that's what the allocations look like. So you can see the community totals are definitely less than requested funds for both 22 and 23, but certainly in line with the overall funding envelope. So, and with that, I'm open to any questions.
Great, thanks for that, Ms. Casually. I'm curious, tell me, obviously your motions are laid out there, but is there thought in regards to the process of this? Would you like to keep the questions per organization, or put a motion on the floor and discuss it per motion? Did you have a thought, a preference?
No preference from administration, whatever it is like.
All right, so if possible, can I ask you to stop sharing your screen so I can see everybody?
Absolutely.
Great. Thanks so much. All right, open the floor for questions to administration. Councillor Thiessen.
Thank you very much, Mayor Clayton. Thanks for the report, Ms. Casulet. Just a question in regards to the enhancement funding. I guess I just need a little clarity on that. You said that they wouldn't exceed, grants wouldn't exceed $14,999. But when I look down the list for 2022 and 2023 for recommended funding, there's a couple that got more than that 15,000 going forward. Is this a change for 2024 or?
Ms. Casulet.
Thank you, through the chair. That recommendation would be for 2023. So allocations have been recommended for 2022. Currently, there is no restrictions or any limitations for that fund. When we made changes to the community group funding policy and procedure last year in 2020, the recommendation was that the community groups or agencies identified to receive core funding would receive that funding for a multi-year period, and then the enhancement fund would be allocated on an annual basis. So for this year, recommendations have been adjusted for 2022, and then the recommendation from administration would be for 2023 and going forward that
Welcome to Zoom. Enter your meeting. Enter your participant ID followed by #. You are in the meeting now. There are more than 20 participants in the meeting.
Ask her to jump in if she has anything to add.
Ms. Lee?
Thank you, through the mayor. The Grande Prairie Regional Tourism Association has indicated over the last number of years, or their board has set a priority in terms of their membership. They calculate their membership fees based on a per capita rate of $2.25 per capita. This rate was set a couple of years ago. The city's contribution has not met the requested amount of the $2.25 per capita from the Regional Tourism Board. We do take in the recommendation, administration has also taken into consideration other funding that the city provides to regional tourism in order to try to come closer to that $2.25 request. That would include the funds that the city pays for the Visitor Information Center lease and some other funding that comes through the Economic Development operational budget as well.
Sorry, I see you there, Councillor Bressie, but is it on Ms. Lee's comments? Okay, because I have a question too. Go ahead.
Yeah, so just that funding for the Tourism Association, is that anything that council or the city has ever endorsed or agreed to, or is it just solely coming from the association board?
Thank you. Through the mayor, the city has representation on the board through a council appointed seat to the board. So that direction or request would have come through a board motion.
Right, but it's nothing that the city's ever actually agreed to. We just got one vote at the table that made that decision. Great, thank you.
Yeah, it's not formalized per se. On that topic, Ms. Lee, can you tell me what the per capita amount equates to, including the gift in kind? Do you know that? Do you have that number?
I do. It might take me just one moment.
Sure. No problem. Did anybody else have anything else on the Regional Tourism Association? Okay. Go ahead, Ms. Lee.
Sorry, apologies. Currently, taking into consideration the membership fees, the lease, and funding for the Rotary bus tour, which is a relatively small amount, the city's current financial contribution equals approximately $1.84 per capita.
Okay. Thank you. Anything else on Grande Prairie Regional Tourism? Councillor Plott.
Sorry, it's not a regional tourism. It's
okay, go ahead for the next item. That's fine.
Okay, thank you. Just wondering, Ms. Casually, if you could just kind of let me know, I know it's never fun to cut organizations, but with COVID, there was also a lot of federal subsidies, rent subsidies, other programs out there. How do we make sure, I guess, I obviously want to help organizations, but were any of these organizations that are listed on here able to qualify for some of that? Because, 75% wage subsidies is probably enough fundraising.
Thank you, through the chair. A number of the community groups that have applied for funding were able to take advantage of some type of relief funding, whether that was COVID emergency relief. Some were eligible for assistance through FCSS funding, but there was definitely lots of groups that received CERB benefits and work subsidies during the.
Is it possible for, or again, I guess, can I ask specifically maybe on a couple of them if they did or didn't? I'm just wondering about the library specifically for me. It's a big line item if they were able to qualify or not.
Give me 1 second.
I think Councillor Friesen is on that board. She might have a comment.
I do have. In fact, the library is one that I'm really going to want to talk about. No, the library is not eligible for relief funding because it's considered a public institution. So there were no grants for, PPE and COVID cleaning. There were no grants to offset wages, even though they kept their curbside delivery, pickup and all that sort of thing. So they kept their staffing component in order to serve our residents throughout COVID, and were not eligible for any relief because they are a public institution.
Okay, I might go back to other ones if they get flagged by their council members, but maybe we won't go through line by line on ones. But I just wanted to ask about that. And then, do you know if any of the organizations actually were forced to do layoffs that chose to get their expenses down? They actually chose to lay people off. Is there organizations on here that, again, that maybe I'll ask for the library on that one specifically because I am worried about funding around that one. But was there any layoffs in a major organization like that?
Ms. Cazalet.
Thank you, through the Mayor. So my understanding is that the library did not have to make layoffs. They were eligible and did access some temporary wage subsidies from March to June of 2020 that they were eligible for. They had received some Young Canada Works funding for some summer positions. As Councillor Friesen mentioned, they were not eligible to access a lot of COVID subsidies. However, they were able to access some grant funding to develop some projects in 2020 that probably would not have been possible otherwise. So they received some emergency community support fund to create a Wi-Fi project, and also some emergency community support to create and implement GPPL CARES, and then a wage subsidy for the Young Canada Works position that they were able to hire a temporary intern for. A number of community groups overall did lay off staff either temporarily, or some even still have state staff laid off.
Thank you for that, Ms.
Councillor O'Toole, did I see your hand? Okay. Anyone else for questions? Councillor Keeson.
Thank you, Mayor Clayton. Ms. Cazalet, just a question in regards to the tables. So I was expecting a big table, and some organizations that maybe applied and didn't receive any funding. Is this table put together of all the applicants for community group funding, or were the ones that weren't approved not listed on these tables?
Ms. Cazalet.
Thank you, through the chair. The table represents all of the applicants that did apply. So the folks that applied for funding in 2022 that did not receive a recommendation for funding allocation would include the Royal Canadian Legion, the Grande Prairie Intercultural Association. As indicated, administration would recommend that they apply through Arts Development Funding Stream for 2022. The Canadian Red Cross Society was not recommended for a funding allocation. It's often that municipalities would fund an organization like that in consultation with the other internal departments. The recommendation was not to allocate funding to that group. And then the People Participating Club is on this list because they did apply for funding. However, the administrative recommendation is that funding for that organization come from the Legacy Fund.
Awesome. No, thank you for that. I do have one more question, if I may.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Mayor Clayton. Just in regards to, I'm looking, one of our bigger requests, sort of a standout, 146,000 operating requests for 2022 and 2023 from the John Howard Society of Grande Prairie, and no recommended funding for that. What was their justification for such a large grant task?
Thank you, through the chair. The request for the John Howard Society of Grande Prairie is they're hoping to relocate to a different facility this year. So some of that grant request would be operational, to cover operational expenses related to that move. They were also looking for a position that would support programming and assist with their overall sort of strategic planning and program implementation associated with MOVE, and sort of an integrated model for youth programming. In although I personally did not speak with the organization, certainly there is a member of administration that works closely with them and did connect with them. So the recommended allocation of the $30,000 would assist them with a portion of the staff position. Ms. Angela Sutherland is the administrative rep that would work with that group. If she's on the line, I would certainly encourage her to jump in if she has anything to add.
Welcome, Ms. Sutherland.
Certainly. Good morning, everybody. In my discussions with Penny, the Executive Director of John Howard, Ms. Cazalet is correct in the fact that they are looking at expanding their opportunities by moving to another location that would allow them to have more integrated services and possible partnerships with other youth-serving agencies. As it hasn't been fully explored yet, what Penny is saying is that in our discussions, this $30,000 would help contribute to the project, whether it would be to assist with topping up some of the opportunity for them to expand in that space, or explore how that could help fund their staffing requirement for this. In addition, Council, I have been in discussions with her on talking about how CSD can support them in part of their exploration, which includes facilitating partners, getting some of that groundwork put together for them. So I hope that answers your question, but we're in continuing conversations with Penny on that, and she's very well aware of the recommendation here.
Okay, now with the $30,000 in 2023, that in conversation with Ms. Mickenach, that wasn't. She's okay with the no allocation in 2022, or
Ms. Sutherland?
Through the chair, there is a recommendation of $30,000 in 2022 for this organization.
Oh, yeah, sorry, my bad. Thank you.
All right.
Got my tables crossed. Sorry about that.
Other questions? Councillor Friesen.
Thank you. I just want to go back to the library funding. Just to clarify here, the grants that were accessed were the ones that were automatically given. I'm just waiting to hear specifically what the name of that was, but it wasn't one that needed to be applied for. Any grant that was related to COVID relief that needed to be applied for and considered, the library
Welcome to Zoom. Enter your participant. You are in the meeting now. There are more than 20 participants in the meeting. You are muted. You can mute or unmute yourself by pressing *6. You have been added to the waiting room. You cannot talk or listen until the host admits you to the meeting. You are muted. You can mute or unmute yourself by pressing *6.
Yield about $100,000 decrease in cash revenue. They do certainly have a really great management system, so they do have some reserves. Definitely, some of those are restricted, have restricted funds that can't be used for any purposes, but they did overall see a slight decrease for the end of the year.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, is this on the library? Because then I'm going to move along.
So I'd actually love to try a motion regarding the library.
Okay, perfect. Councilor Rusty.
And what that motion is, and I hope that people are open to it, I have a bunch more questions about the library, and I think that this could take up the whole morning, and I think at the end of the day, we're not going to have the information we need to make an informed decision about this. So I would move that committee requests a meeting between council and the Grande Prairie Library Board, and we defer a decision on library funding until after that meeting has happened. And just to speak to this, I think the library is a different organization. The funding we're talking about the library is more than a third of the total funding we're talking today. So just in terms of pure dollar amounts, I think it deserves some special consideration because it's got the biggest impact on our ratepayers. Over 1% of our taxes go to library funding. I think that deserves a lot of due consideration. I also think it's different because it, along with the art gallery, which might show my hand on a future motion I'm intending to make, but it's the main operator of one of our two flagship municipal spaces. And I really think we need to think about not just what are the impacts on the library, but if the library's closed on weekends, what impact does that have on the whole feel of the Montrose Cultural Center and the Mama Wee Concourse and our whole downtown core? And so I really think that this is conversation that deserves deserves information directly from the board and also more consideration than we can give it today. So I hope the council will support this motion.
Councillor Palat.
Thanks, Mayor Clayton. Councillor Bressie, I'm struggling with your motion because I don't know what that gets. It'd be nice to have a meeting, but I think if we've got questions specifically about the library as council we want answers on, we should ask administration to report and bring it up to us. I'm worried we go to a meeting with the board, which would be great. We set that up. It's 2 weeks from now. We have that meeting, and then from that meeting, we go, hey, we have all these questions for administration. We should probably find the answers. And so as much as I like the meeting with the board, I don't know what the outcome of that is other than it's nice to have some face time. I think if we really have questions about library funding specifically, I think it's upon us as councillors to just ask our administration to answer those questions so we can make a decision. I just don't see how us meeting with the library board helps with that, personally. I think we're also running into, if we went and met with every single organization's board, it'd be a lot harder to say no to anybody as well. I'm going to say that because that's their job. They're going to push for funding at that point. And I can appreciate they're a larger line item, and we should meet with them at some point. I just don't think meeting with the board to go through funding is what we should be doing. So I actually, the more I'm talking about this, I can't support it. I'm in full support of us having a meeting about what we want administration to come back with for information at a later committee meeting. But I don't see board to board being a good approach at this point. I think it's just too much.
Are there comments or questions on the motion?
I'd love to close.
Yeah, just one sec. Councillor Friesen.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Bressie, for that motion, and I will be supporting it, and I would encourage my colleagues to do as well. You know, to have it, you hit the nail on the head there with how important this is to, it's really the very fabric of our, you know, downtown gem that is the Montrose Cultural Centre. And to consider, we now have Saturday and Sunday access there, and to consider now going to 5 days from 7 does impact more than just the library and access to the library. And I think in order to really fully understand what it is that the library needs, I mean, we've got an outstanding agreement with them that we're trying to work through that has been sort of sitting undone at the occupancy agreement. And the library board requested an occupancy agreement months ago, and it's you know, not there yet. We haven't seen it yet at the board. So let's take some time to meet with such an organization that requires such a large amount of funding and that is a different level of responsibility from the city than most of our other organizations as well. So please let's support that.
Ms. Cajolet.
We'd just like to address something that Councillor Friesen spoke about, and that is the lease agreement or occupancy agreement with the library. So I think that administration has been working closely with their planning committee and has had several conversations and drafts back and forth between the two. So I think that certainly the library team is doing a tremendous amount of work in that regard. It just may not have been reviewed yet by the entire board. So,
great, thanks for that. Councillor Thiessen. And sorry, this is discussion on the motion, please.
Yes, definitely. I appreciate the motion. I can understand where Councillor Platt's coming from on this. Also, I can understand where Councillor Friesen is coming on this. It is a big line item, and I do think we need a little bit more understanding. 100% echo the comments made by Councillor Bressie earlier, and so I will support this. But part of my concern is I mean, right now we're talking about decreasing access to the library for 2 days on the weekend. I'd like to have a conversation with the library and see what that entails or when that might happen, and perhaps also why we're talking about 2 days instead of, you know, closed on Sundays, you know, and what kind of impact that has. Like, we could close down the library for 2 days or say that's what needs to happen in order to achieve the budgetary restraints. But if they're going to close down based off of the funding that the city's giving them, I don't want to have a catch-all. Well, we're closed on weekends now. Maybe we're closed on Sundays. Maybe I need to understand a little bit more where that's coming from. And being that the library does play such a critical role in being a community hub for so many different sectors of Grande Prairie, that I'd like to have that conversation and stretch it out board to council and get a bit of a better understanding. I know that we've been holding their line flat for pretty much a few years, and they've been asking for increases. I just like to understand where those increases are going and how it's going to improve service at the library, as well as other options that may be on the table. And we won't get that unless we have that conversation. Otherwise, it's all speculation. So for all those reasons, I'm going to support Councillor Bressy's motion and hope that we pass this and have that conversation with the library. Thanks.
I'm just going to interject here. Fair enough on your comments, Councillor Heathen, but I don't know if you've given administration the opportunity to answer those questions. If you have questions on specific what the increase of money is going to, let's follow the process that's set out in front of us. Ask administration those questions. For us to delay on a decision today is not what we've been asked to do. We've been asked to make these decisions that are in front of us, go through the information, work with administration to get the answers. To delay on this decision is not in our best interest. There's been a ton of work put into this, and it's not fair to discredit the work until you've given administration the opportunity to answer the questions. If administration said, actually, we don't know, then let's have consideration of sitting down with the board. But administration didn't say that. Administration once didn't answer a question. They never once said, we're not sure, let's get back to you. So to sit down and have a discussion with the board, in my opinion, isn't providing an opportunity for the process that was set out in front of us. So I won't support the motion. Further comments or questions on the motion? Councillor O'Toole.
This is particular to the outcome here. It wasn't that many years ago where we dealt with every one of these requests, and this was not a 15-minute conversation. Some of these lasted for a couple hours. So can you imagine being here for 6-7 hours a day for 2 weeks, listening to people ask? And by golly, I think everybody that's on this list deserves money. But at the end of the day, we have to scrutinize this, and this is what administration's job is, to scrutinize the value. What they're asking for is actually a value that we can digest. And so they've already done all the hard work. We just have to sit there and possibly agree or ask some questions to get some clarification. I don't really want to be here all day or for the next 2 weeks. And so there's my point of view. We tried to streamline it. It is a good process. Let administration do their job. And if there is questions, like Mayor Clayton said, we can ask administration. And if we don't know the answers, they can probably find the answers very quickly. So thank you. There's my 2 cents.
Thanks. Councillor Minhas.
Thank you, Mayor President. I'm having a hard time to support this motion because we talked about last year, I remember last couple of years too, if we take a library out from this community funds, but it hasn't happened. But my understanding is right now the administration worked hard enough to keep the amount in line. And I don't think we needed to keep talking about this more and more, and we'll see what happens next year. New council does it. But right now, I'm not be able to support Dylan's motions. Thank you.
All right, Councillor Bressy to close.
Thank you. I think it's a little bit disingenuous to say that, hey, if we do this with the library, we're going to have to do this with all other organizations. We give this organization 66 times more funding on an annual basis than many other organizations on this list. We give it 183 times more funding than one organization on this list. By sheer sense of scale, it's fundamentally different. It's fundamentally different because it's a flagship tenant. It's fundamentally different because the library board doesn't actually get its authority from us. It gets its authority from provincial legislation. It's in every way, it's so much different than other community groups. So to suggest that if we do this with the library, we need to do this with other groups, just isn't true. It's a different organization. But I think the main thing that I object to is talking about administration to give us all the answers we need. And with all due respect to council, that's a continued abdication of our responsibility to be the strategic leaders of this organization that we keep on giving up. We keep on asking administration to lead the strategy of this organization when that should be us. And I 100% trust administration to be able to give us the good tactical nuts and bolts information about where's this funding going to go, what's per capita look like, how's it changed over years. Those nuts and bolts conversations, I 100% agree with. But it's not administration's job, and we shouldn't expect administration to be leading the strategic conversation of what are the expectations for Montrose Cultural Center's flagship tenants and their operational hours. What is a priority in our community? Is it adult literacy, or is it kids programming, or is it things that don't even happen in the library? I think there's huge strategic ramifications, both to the library and to the city, about reducing funding and holding it there for a couple of years, and on a very different scale than there is with any other organization on this list. So I really think that that's a council to board conversation, the strategy. By all means, let's ask administration the technical questions we have and trust them to give those answers. But it's past time, I think, for us to sit down with that board and have a strategic conversation about where are you hoping to go and where's the strategic implications of where you'll actually be going if we make the decision we're making today. So I think that it's council's responsibility, not administration's responsibility, to be having the conversation that needs to happen with that organization now. So I hope that council will support this motion and put that conversation in place.
All right, that was a close, so I will call the question on Councillor Bressy's motion. That is carried 4-3. Oh, Councillor Minhas?
Yes, I made a mistake. I made vote wrong.
Okay. So, Ms. Karbaschewski, do you want us to revote, or can you just note that?
Thank you, Mayor Clayton. I will clear the votes, and we can call for a revote.
I thought Dylan convinced you, Yad. He convinced me, and I was already on side.
You're in the council chambers, I think. Ms. Karbaschewski, if you're speaking to us, you're muted. So.
Thank you, Mayor Clayton. I'm just waiting for eScribe to refresh. One moment.
All right. Let's just wait for the council chambers to come back. There we go. Let's revote on that, please. Oh, no, sorry, that's the wrong vote there. Don't vote on that one. Unless you're seeing something different. Right now I'm seeing, there we go, that's taken away. Just having a bit of a technical glitch here. There we go. So please revote on Councillor Bressy's motion. There we go. And that motion is defeated. So I'm going to ask, since we already an hour into this, that we can possibly get to, maybe there's a few of the motions that council considers low-hanging fruit that there won't be as much discussion on. I would possibly suggest that item number 4 and 5 would be fairly easy for us to accomplish this morning, possibly even number 3. but I'll leave that up to people that are willing to make motions, and then we can go through discussions of items within Table 1 and potential grants, operating grant allocations as in Attachment 1. So if there's an appetite to maybe put some of the other motions forward, Councillor O'Toole.
I would like to make a motion that's number 4 is committee recommend council approve the operational funding of $10,000 of Peace Wapiti Speed Skating Club 2022 from the Arctic Winter Games Legacy Fund.
That motion is in order. I'll ask if there's any comments or questions on that motion. Seeing none, I'll call the question on approving the operational funding of $10,000 for Peace Wapiti Speed Skating Club for 2022 from the Arctic Winter Games Legacy Fund. Call the question. Please vote on that. That's carried unanimously. Any other business? Councillor Thiessen.
Thank you, Mayor Clayton. I would move that Council defer the 2022-2023 capital funding requests to the 2022 budget deliberations.
Great. That motion is in order. Comments or questions on that? Councillor Palat.
Thanks, Mayor Clayton. Just a question for Mr. Casually. With us deferring this to November, does it have any impact on any of these organizations at all with the capital requests? Or
Ms. Casually?
Thank you, through the chair. I think that certainly there may be in terms of being able to advance some of this funding right away. So the art gallery, some of their requests for funding may be impacted by the lack of confirmation, but overall, I think that deferring the discussion to the budget deliberations will have not a significant impact for these groups.
Okay, thank you.
Any further comments or questions on that motion? Councillor O'Toole.
So I would make a motion to...
Oh, sorry, we have a motion on the floor right now.
Oh,
Councillor O'Toole.
sorry.
That's all right. So the motion, as Councillor Thiessen put forward, is to defer the 2022-2023 capital funding request to the 2022 budget deliberations. If Councillor Friesen.
Thank you, Mayor Clayton. I wonder if it would be in order to request that we separate out the art gallery request.
Yep. We can make an amendment to that motion to, it would be the budget capital funding request as, you know, without the art gallery capital.
Yeah, exactly. And then I would follow up with a motion to discuss the art gallery request today.
Okay.
So, yeah.
So
the amendment.
Questions on that amendment? Sorry, Councillor Friesen, to cut you off. Any comments or questions on the amendment to remove the art gallery from that motion? Councillor Thiessen.
Yeah, I guess I need a little more context before I'm able to vote to remove it from there. For me, this seems like a pretty reasonable ask and contribution, $40,000. It's typically a small budget item. I don't know if there's going to be a lot of discussion or debate on this, especially for the art gallery and helping them out. I'd just like to know why we'd separate out just the instant fund them. Is that the plan to ensure that we fund them? Or I guess I just need a little more context to why you're splitting this out there, Councillor Friesen.
Councillor Friesen?
Thank you. So we did hear from Mr. Beck from the gallery about this a couple of weeks ago, and the idea for this funding is as much, again, an economic recovery as it is anything else. And I think to have the assurance of that immediately for the art gallery would be preferable.
Councillor Thiessen.
Thank you, Mayor Clayton. Just a question for administration. With this capital request for 2022, they're hoping to get it in 22, not hoping to get it right away? like their planned budgeted 2022 $40,000. We hope we get this from the city in 2022.
Ms. Cajolet?
Thank you, through the mayor. Yes, that is the expectation that the capital funding would be received in 2022. This project would begin, although the planning is already underway, the physical renovation would begin in April of 2022.
Okay. Thank you for that, Ms. Cajolet. In saying that, I'm pretty sure this is a given when we move it to our 2022 budget. Obviously, it'll be up for debate, but you know, with our relationship with the Grande Prairie Public, or with the Prairie Art Gallery, and what they do for our community, and their full expectation to do this work in April of 2022, I don't know if we would hold a gun to this funding, and I think it should be up for debate, because I don't want to determine this before new council has a chance to tweak the budget. And I'm sure administration with this recommendation will have it approved unless somebody flags it and asks to get it taken off. So I guess for those reasons, go through the budget process and be approved. And I don't feel like there's a need to make a guarantee right now for the next council. Thanks.
Councillor Plott, comments or questions on the amendment?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, on that, Mayor Clayton, I appreciate Eunice's or Councillor Friesen's intent here, because I mean, I'd love to see this happen too. But you know, I agree with Councillor Thiessen in that this might be the only line item on a budget about the gallery. And as a new councillor coming in, it'd be nice to have a conversation about funding for the gallery and get a new person that's going to be on council up to speed about a funding request during the budget process. So I think that's where it does belong. I'm pretty confident it's going to get funded. Hopefully, a lot of the people who are on this chat will be there in November, and we're all supporting this. And so I'm pretty confident it's just a process. If it's not happening until next April, I don't think it's hurting the gallery. And I do think it's important that new councillors coming on will have an opportunity to learn and speak about a specific funding to the gallery that has an education piece. So can't support it, love the intent, but can't support it.
Any other comments or questions on the amendment? Seeing none, I will call the question on the amendment to remove the art gallery from the original motion. And that is defeated. So now back to the original motion to defer the 2022-2023 capital funding request to the 2022 budget deliberation this fall. Any other comments or questions on this motion? Ms. Cajolet.
Thank you, Mayor Clayton. I did just hear from the executive director at the Art Gallery, and they did indicate that they are not able to submit a budget to the provincial and federal grant applications without knowing what their other capital and funding streams are. That all works on percentages, so it would be beneficial for them to have confirmation of that funding sooner rather than later.
All right, thank you for that. Councillor Bressie.
In light of that, I'd like to make a motion. I don't know if we've ever made as a council, and I'd like to move that we reconsider that motion.
Okay, that is in order. Reconsideration of the last motion, the last amendment.
Yeah, and just
go ahead.
Sorry, if I could just be really clear about my motion. My understanding of this motion isn't that this is a re-vote on that last motion. It's a vote on whether or not we will hold a re-vote on that motion.
Yeah, you bet. So we're having a vote on whether or not we will have the vote.
Yes, and just to speak to that, I encourage council to support this motion so that we can have debate with this new information in mind. So even if you don't support it, please support this motion.
Right. Okay, so I'll call the question. This is to vote on whether or not we will reconsider the previous motion. That is carried unanimously. So now the previous motion put forward by Councillor Friesen, which is an amendment to remove the art gallery from the discussions of the original motion, is in order. Comments or questions on that amendment? Councillor Brassi.
Yeah, I made the motion because I'll definitely be changing my vote, and I encourage everybody else to. I really think that it's incumbent on us to think, how can we be strategic with our investments? And I know the art gallery's shown that they're very capable of going out and getting outside investment from other levels of government as well as private donors. And so if they're saying that this has a high likelihood of getting dollars into our community, that's not just coming from our municipality, I've got a lot of confidence they've got a very good chance of that. So I'd encourage council to support this motion so that we can give them funding today so they can go after other funding.
Thank you for that. Any other comments or questions on the amendment? Seeing none, I'll call the question. And that is carried unanimously. All right, so now to the motion as amended, deferring the capital funding request without the art gallery to the 2022 budget deliberations. I'll call the question. That's carried unanimously. Now, I just want to clarify, Ms. Cajolet, if we were to, without an actual motion funding this for the art gallery, is it funded? Do you want a motion to fund this, or will it go as presented within the table, assuming the table is just passed in its entirety?
Thank you, Mayor Clayton. Administration would recommend a motion to fund the art gallery.
Okay, thank you for that. So with Councillor Friesen.
So I will make that motion that we fund the art gallery for their capital request of $40,000.
Comments or questions on that motion? Okay. Seeing none, I will call the question.
I'm sorry, Mayor Clayton. We're just having a little bit of technical difficulties. If you can just give me a minute.
No worries. Since it's been an hour, is it okay if we just take a 10-minute break and let the chambers get their technical difficulties? I know we do have a motion on the floor, but if the group is fine with that, we'll just take a 10-minute break and let the system maybe rejig itself, and we'll come back and vote on that motion. Thank you, everyone. Just so everyone's aware, we'll come back in about 2 minutes, assuming the council chambers are in order and functioning as best as possible.
Thank you, Mayor Clayton. We are good to go.
All right, so just wait for council to come back on, and then we can get started. Perfect. I'll just check, Ms. Karbashewski, are we good in the council chambers now?
Thank you, Mayor Clayton. The chamber is good.
Mayor Clayton, I believe they're still having some trouble in the chambers. I'm trying to run it from my computer, and okay. I think we're good to go.
All right. Thanks, Ms. Van Bleekveld. I see everyone except Councillor Thiessen. There we go. Perfect. I understand Director Burke had a point of clarification before we vote on the motion.
Just a suggestion for clarity is if the motion could include the year of funding. I think that if it included 2022, it would meet the intent of the art gallery to have the commitment from the city, but also fit into our budget cycle so that there was no uncertainty whether it was funded as of today or funded in our 2022 budget. So we've requested a year be added to the motion.
Ms. Friesen, Councillor Friesen, are you fine with just a friendly amendment to your motion to include the year?
Yes, I think that would be good. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. So I think we are ready then. If we could call the question on that motion. Okay, so I'm just going, Ms. Van Bleekveld, I'm just going to do a hand-raising motion on this one, if you're okay. We'll give you a bit of time to get the system back going, but give us some time to continue on. So I'll call the question. All those in favor? And that is carried unanimously. Thank you for that. So moving along, I'm just going through our list of recommendations. We have approved item number 4. We have amended and approved item number 3. Is there any other business arising? Councillor O'Toole.
I will take the opportunity to move number 5. The committee recommend council approve allocation of enhancement funding with the provisions that no single grant will exceed $14,999.
All right. Comments or questions on that motion? Just wanted to read one thing. All right, Ms. Cajolet.
Thank you, Mayor Clayton. I think for clarity, it may be helpful to add a year to that motion as well, so that we would say that would take effect in 2023.
Perfect. I was just wondering about that. Okay, so friendly amendment to that to include for the year of 2023.
I'm good with that.
All right. So seeing no questions, no hands raising, I will call the question on that motion. Just gotta get down to this thing. There we go. Oh, there we go. And that motion passes unanimously. Moving along to other business, there is the operational funding in Table 1, business to deal with that, as well as the community group funding, the operating grant allocations as in Attachment 1 to deal with. I will put it out to Council. Councillor Palat.
Thanks, Mayor. Given not a motion, but I just looking to maybe amend the line item, and I just wanted to get more clarification, please, from the administration on it. I'm just wondering on our Grande Prairie Youth Emergency Shelter Society, you know, the request was 130, we're down at 16. I just want to make sure that that organization is going to be okay without that $24,000 in funding or ish. So if I could just maybe get somebody in administration just to speak to me on how that impacts the youth organization if that funding isn't met this year.
Okay. Ms. Cagelet or Ms. Sutherland, whoever may have been in communication with the Grande Prairie Youth Emergency Shelter. Ms. Cagelet.
Mayor Clayton, we're just getting those details for you. Just one moment, please.
Okay.
And if I can, Mayor Clayton, there's one other one maybe administration can work on as well while I got the mic open. But just the coalition around Safer Roads Alberta, I'm just wondering if they can maybe update us on what would happen if that funding was a zero, like what the implications would be in the community if we didn't do that, what other options could look like, maybe some advocacy that we could do on behalf of the city instead. But
Ms. Cagelet, you're muted if you're talking to us.
Thank you, Mayor Clayton. So the request from the Grande Prairie Youth Emergency Shelter, the increase mostly would be attributed to staffing costs. So their 2021 operating allocation was 110. They did request additional funds for 2022 and 2023, and the recommendation was just slightly less than their 2021 operating amount.
Okay, so they've added staff since then, though. Since the 2021 budget as well, or 2020, I guess, budget, they've added staffing as well.
It appears that way through the chair. I can't confirm. I did not speak with the organization directly, but I do know that the allocation of the community, of the operating grant received from the city, that the bulk of that grant is utilized for staffing resources.
I have a question on that as well, Ms. Cagelet. So the recommendation was not to grant the request of an increase. However, the recommendation was to actually give them less overall, and I'm curious the reasoning behind that.
Thank you, through the chair. Most of the organizations listed in even in the core funding categories, administration has recommended a slight reduction for, and that is in order to fund new requests that were received for 2022 that had not been previously funded.
Just if I can ask one, and this may be more for a financial question. If we were to amend a line item, specifically, where would the funding come from? So I don't know if that's for Mr. Bork or if that's from Ms. Whiteway, but I'm just wondering where would that funding come from, or what would that look like?
Director Burke, Ms. Whiteway.
Thank you, Mayor Clayton. So I guess the clarification would be around if the whole bucket was having to be increased, then we would have to increase the operating budget for 2022 overall. So that would affect what comes forward at deliberations. later on this year.
Okay.
Go ahead, Councillor.
Is there also an ability, just if the council went through and I get a feeling there's a few that people were going to want to try to fund more than what's on here. Would there be ability to see what the total overfund one and did a one-time from reserves? Just for that, my worry is I don't necessarily think, I feel like through COVID, we need to help organizations maybe a bit more. I think we were on the right track though, so I don't want to set a precedence of us moving the budget up by $200,000 or $300,000, say, if it gets amended by those amounts. So would we be able to specifically take it from a one-time from reserves for a top-up on this?
Ms. Whiteway?
Thank you, Mayor Clayton. And that is the key point, is these organizations would have to understand that it is one time. Reserves can't fund ongoing needs. So if that was the decision made to use some of the unallocated reserve money that we have available, it would be for just the 1 year only.
So on that, Mayor Clayton, can I amend the line item then? I'm not sure if we're going to.
Sure. I think Ms. Cazalet has some information, and then I'll come back to that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Clayton. So to answer Councillor Palat's question, the organization did have staffing changes from overnight, like 19 to 20 wages were increased. So that is the reason for the additional request for funds.
Okay.
And so before you get to that, on a similar note, Ms. Cazalet, can you tell me, you had mentioned that most of the organizations received a reduction to sort of align things financially, I understand that, but what specifically was the increase recommended for the St. Lawrence Centre? Majority of the rest saw a decrease, and I just wondered why the increase on that specific one.
Thank you, through the chair. The request from the St. Lawrence Centre was for $122,000 for both operating years. That request was to fund security positions for the organization, support the needs of the group, and administration recognizes that there is some challenges there, and certainly was supportive of recommending an increase to fund one position, which would be the $61,000, and that would allow existing staff to focus on programming and not be focusing on security needs for the day.
Okay, perfect. Thanks for that. All right, Councillor Palat, you had a motion, I'm hoping, or something?
I just would like to make I'm not sure if this is a motion to a line item or if we're amending it. I'm not sure how the administration wants this to be done, if we're trying to amend a line item and then have a motion on the whole amount of money, or what that looks like. So I guess I'm looking for administration to kind of ask me or answer, help me with that.
Sure. Or not. I'll just give some advice, and if administration would like it handled differently, that's fine. One of the recommended motions is to approve the operational funding as presented in Table 1. That whole buck of money is inclusive of the specific line items that you were looking to potentially amend. So if you wanted to put a motion on the floor in regards to Table 1, similar to previous, it could be minus or in addition to specific items within that bucket of community group funding within the operational funding table.
I would be fine with putting forward that motion that we approve the Table 1 operational funding. Hearing that now we can make a subsequent motion around if we wanted to spend above it, we could also have a conversation about reserves. So I think this sets the tone of what we want to spend on that. But for now, I think that's a good motion, so we can put out the Table 1 2022-2023 operational funding as presented.
All right. Ms. Cazalet.
Thank you, Mayor Clayton. Administration would recommend that the motion would be operational funding as presented, and that I could certainly bring up the table that was in the PowerPoint presentation, because the 2 years, the allocations for the 2 years are just slightly different.
So yeah, it would be the Table 1 with the totals, but then you're going to expand it to show the differences between 2022 and 2023. All right, so the motion is to approve the operational funding as presented in Table 1 for 2022 and 2023. And Ms. Cazalet is going to just expand that on the screen so you can see by item what they specifically are. All right. Great, thank you for that. So as you'll see there, the 2022 items are listed, 2023 items are listed, and within that community group funding amount of approximately 1.9 is the various items that were on your attachment. Councillor Friesen.
Thank you. I would like to move an amendment that the library be funded for their ask of $1.969008 million. So that's $1,969,008 for 2022 and 2023.
Okay, so that amendment is in order.
To speak to it, as I mentioned, the library is already funded lower than any other city library in the province, and $6 and some cents out of $28.50 lower than, to give an idea of perspective, what is that in percent, lower than the next comparable city of Medicine Hat. So the ask is to be funded at $28.50 per capita. The 2020 cuts resulted in a 5% decrease in materials budget for the library, which this ask only maintains. It also resulted in a 23% reduction in public IT access, which this ask only maintains, and a 13% reduction in programming. They have been subsidizing the materials through some restricted funds, and that certainly could continue, but that's only the materials that they've been able to subsidize. I'd like to point out also that the city has entered into an agreement where the library, the public library, pays piece of library system per capita on materials borrowed, and that's fair and good, but that is an agreement that's in place that the library has no control over to reduce its budget on. So the things that will be impacted, as I mentioned earlier, are public access to the library. The library is one of the few services in our city that truly have equitable access. The majority of the programs and services that the library provides are free to the residents of Grande Prairie, and that is not the case with many other of what else is there that the city provides. I guess it'd be the trails and the parks are the only other services that residents can access that are truly free of charge for them. This is really a critical need for our community to have equitable access to what the library provides, and I've talked probably ad nauseum about this. And let's fund to the ask. That still leaves us the lowest funded library in the province per capita. And that's why I'd like to see the funding increase to the 1.9 and some million.
Just a point of clarification before I go to comments or questions, Councillor Friesen, was your amendment to hope to keep it to 1.9 or as they requested to 1.9 and then the 2 million?
No, right now I have just said for the 2 years, because I am trusting that we will, we've been talking about this already for a couple of years, how to fund the library and what's going to happen. And I trust that we will get together with the library board and figure this out and come to a place where we understand the importance of the library and the value that it is to the community, as well as the cost to the community. So for now, I'm fine with the 1.9 some million for both years.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Plott.
Thanks, Mayor Clayton. Again, I can't support this because I still think we need to be asking questions to administration. Appreciate that we're not funding as much, but I also don't think we want to race to the top of being the most expensive funded place just because that's a number that's higher. I remember being back on library board years ago, and maybe the data has changed, but at that point, some libraries were paying a rent to their city. We don't pay rent. And I think if we're going to get through all those numbers, I'd like to see an actual scale of all of that broke down, which hasn't been provided to council. But if there is data out there that shows that, great. But we had a heck of a time figuring out what was equal line to line from library to library report. Was maintenance included? Were utilities included? There was a lot of other line items on that. So I just want to be careful that we're not saying we're funding our gallery proportionally, because we're not sure if we're comparing apples to apples. I don't have that information in front of me, and so I probably agree that maybe we are low, but I think for me to want to make that big jump. The other concern I guess I have with this is maybe I'm missing something in the report, but again, back on library board, I asked why we weren't opening more hours, and at that time we didn't want to be, and we didn't want to be open Sundays late. We didn't want to be open evenings late. So that was a library board decision. So maybe that's changed, but that's not in the package I'm reading saying the extra money is so that we're going to be open extra hours. So if the extra money is specifically open extra hours, that's a conversation I'm opening to. But just to say, here's more money and not sure if we're going to have more hours, not sure if we're really funding a line, I don't think that's proper at this point. So I can't support the motion. I'd love to have us have a conversation with the library. Again, I was happy with that. If we'd ask administration a bunch of questions and tabled this part of it, I'd be happy with that. I just wasn't excited about going and meeting the board because I think these are the kind of questions we need to. The board's not going to give us that information if we would have sat with them. That's information I think we need to know if we're comparing apples to apples with other municipalities in our province. So I can't support it.
Other comments or questions on the motion? Councillor Thiessen.
There we go. Thank you, Mayor Clayton. Thanks for the motion, Councillor Friesen. Thanks for your thoughts, Councillor Palat. I'm struggling on this one, but I am leaning towards supporting it. And a big reason why is I also want to have that conversation with the library board. But as I look at their operating request asks over the last 4 years, they just keep going up. And if we're at the lowest and they get to a point where they approach a new council or our council and say, hey, we just can't do it anymore, that's why our ask is now $600,000 above what our previous year's asks were, and we keep holding the line on that. I think they're just going to fall further behind, and the increase to the cost of service is just going to grow over time, or at least the increase to the asks. And when there's a larger disparity between that, it puts a lot more pressure on the councils to act. Now, it seems like a big jump to $300,000 above and beyond. But I think at that point, we actually give future councils sort of that leverage to have those discussions and to grow in that understanding and to justify the costs and the expenses of the library and really get all the details going. It actually buys us time and it prevents a bigger jump in the future, which I can foresee happening in a year or two. So for all those reasons, I think I'm leaning towards it, but unless somebody's got a better argument, I can still be swayed.
Thanks, Councillor Thiessen. A question for administration or possibly Councillor Friesen. I'm curious, the comment has been made about if they don't get this increase, and even if they don't get the increase as recommended by administration, that they may close weekends. What consideration, to your knowledge, Ms. Cagelet, was given for using some of the reserves to get them to a more stabilized operating position?
Thank you, Mayor Clayton. There was no indication in the application that there was intent to do that. I certainly do have information as to what the increases would fund, but I don't know what they're anticipating.
Sure, if you could explain that, that'd be great.
For sure. Thank you.
The recommended increases, to your knowledge, will fund what?
Yep. So for the sort of budget from the library that is presented for 2022, so certainly it would be an increase in the per capita funding. There was also there is a little bit of actually information here in relation to reserves. So there would be an intent to utilize some reserves for material purchases and also for a Collins writing request. Overall, in the expense area, they're requesting a 10% increase for children's, 5% increase to teens, increases in e-resources, and then increase to adult materials. For programs, salaries and benefits, there would be a 1.5% cost of living adjustment, the introduction of an additional library tech position. There would be increased hours for paging, circulation, and the children's department, so that would adjust their FTE in its entirety. IT services they're certainly intending to improve Wi-Fi speeds for patrons, be able to offer color printing, wireless printing, as well as some required computer and server upgrades.
Thank you for that. So I personally won't support the amendment, and I'll give consideration to the recommendation from administration. I believe that the library provides great services within our community. However, if they are in an emergency situation in regards to support they need for wages, they can ask for emergency community group funding. If they were looking for opportunities to expanding programs, I think that they could visit corporate sponsorship opportunities, because there are many people in our community that would be passionate about supporting the library. However, I can't support the amendment because at a minimum, the recommended increase would be the maximum and I would be acceptable with. So I don't know if there's other comments or questions on the amendment. Councillor Bressie.
Yeah, thank you. I will support this amendment. I think that it is they're not in a fiscal emergency because of anything except for the city historically underfunding them. And I think that it's not responsible for us to make a reserve play and expect for reserves to cover long-term operating. Fair enough to ask questions about how are reserves covering material acquisition. Although even that, material wears out. It's not even realistic probably to replace a lot of material with reserves. I think that the library is something that I would love to see expanded availability in our community. I would love the library's dream of having a satellite campus in the Eastlink Center so it's accessible to residents who have transportation issues come to fruition. I would love to see there to be even more programming for adults that are trying to improve their skills so that they're more employable. I would love to see there be continued opportunities for kids from low-income families who have had their educational resources at school slashed to be able to continue accessing the library programs on the weekend. And I just think it plays such an important role in so many ways in our community. And the fiscal crunch we're putting on it isn't for any strategic reason. It's just because we haven't done the hard work of figuring out with the board what's the vision for the library in the long term. And it's been an easy way for us to reduce our community group funding because it's the biggest community group that we fund. I really don't think that we've got good strategic reason to do the recommended funding. I really think that this amendment should pass, so I hope the council will pass it.
Councillor Palat.
Thanks, Mayor Given. I agree with Councillor Bressie, but if we're talking strategy, that's where I'm struggling with this. If we would have funded this to the full level, they would have had a $200,000 surplus. So if they're going to come and tell us, hey, we're going to add evenings, we're going to add programs, we're going to do all these things, I can get behind that. Right now, what we're saying is let's just fund them more and let's hope they do that. That's not strategic. That's not strategic to me at all. And we've been asking our organization to be strategic across the board. So to just jump up $200,000 on funding without an opportunity to sit and make sure that they're going to add programs and services, I don't think that's good. I'm sure they will, Councillor Bressie. We have no assurances when we move the funding that that's what's going to happen. And again, saying it's underfunded when we haven't seen reports around other communities line by line is a little misleading. So I can't support it. I would happily support a motion to table this line item till we get more information about our library funding and where programming is going to go with it to see if it supports spending more money. Totally could support something like that. But just to say, hey, let's throw $200,000 more because my feeling is we're unfunding them without really clarifying that, I'm struggling with why after budget and the work our administration's done, that we'd willy-nilly just throw $200,000 out without having some clarification of what benefit it's going to bring to the community. And so for that, I can't support it. Love to if there was an amendment and you could prove to me that it's needed. It was on the library board for a reason. I think it's a great part of our community. But I'm very cautious about just putting money out there when this might have been all surplus funding for last year.
All right, so, Councillor O'Toole.
I don't think I'll be supporting this motion either. One of the concerns I got is I don't think the library at this time charges any fee for memberships. And, there's a couple dollars if we had, I don't know how many members we have, but they can be a little bit more innovative too. I know that the fee was a lot more money, then they went down to zero. But with that being said, we need to know more about what's going on in the library. I agree 100% with Mr. Palat. I'd like to hear what they have, what they're going to be spending the money on. And I know that there is a good portion of money in their reserves, and that's for projects in education and all that good stuff. I know it's earmarked, but I had the honor of working with Mr. Palat and myself when we were on council, when I was on council a few years ago to be on the library board, and they were very innovative at that time. And I won't support this, sorry.
Councillor Thiessen and then Councillor Bressie.
Thank you, Mayor Clayton. Just judging by the sound of this conversation, sounds like we should have passed the previous motion to table and wait to have that discussion with the library, because it seems like we may be drifting that way anyways. I just want to make a comment on the innovation of the library and the things that they're doing now. I don't sit on the board. I followed Councillor O'Toole and sat on that same library board with Councillor Platt. And the library has always been fairly innovative. It was part of our board's decision that year that I sat on it with Councillor Platt to stop charging for memberships to get more people going into the library and to work with the provincial track system where you could interlibrary loan all across the province. So, I mean, those are ways of delivering a service, not just to Grande Prairie residents in Grande Prairie, but to Grande Prairie residents across the province. And that didn't come at an extra expense to the library. Another thing that's a recent development, at least in the arrangement with Peace Library Systems and the Grande Prairie Public Library, is that the Grande Prairie Public Library is going to shift to our internet server for their website. So now they're no longer going to be paying costs and expenses on having somebody carry their domain and to run their website. That's going to be taken care of under the service arrangement by Peace Library System. So that's another little small innovation that in the end, I mean, it chunks away about $30,000 to $40,000 of a cost expense on the Grande Prairie Public Library, but it's also beneficial to the system, and it shows that they're making wise use of the dollars that they do have. I'm totally okay with tabling this conversation as my vote went before, but I'm still in favor of supporting this motion as it is. I haven't heard anything that would convince me otherwise yet, so I'll just keep listening in. But I'd encourage people to at least give it a good hard consideration as to what the library does for our community, for all demographics. To our newcomers, to the homeless serving population, to our low-income families, to anybody who loves to read. It touches everybody, and it's a worthwhile investment. And I would really hate to stick a future council with a bigger bill on a bigger request if we just keep deferring this and holding the line now. So I'd like to have that conversation, but I think we should recognize what the library does to our community and invest in it appropriately. Thank you.
I had a question for Ms. Cajolet, or maybe Councillor Friesen knows. when we talk about the per capita amount, and it was referenced that we're at the lowest, does that consideration include additional regional support? I know, for example, the county supports the library, and so would that include what the region supports would we still be at the lowest if we were to include what the county does to support the library?
Thank you, Mary. Thank you. No, my understanding is that is the home municipality support for the libraries. And to suggest that we don't need to fund our library because it's okay, we've got other regional partners, is a bit concerning to me. Our regional partners would appreciate that, and it still doesn't look good on us as the host community for the library.
Just a little sorry.
Go ahead, Ms. Cajolet.
Through the chair. So based on the information provided by the library, my understanding is that number of the 23.70 per capita is approximation there, is based on just the contribution from the city for the 1.6 that we have presently funded. The county of Grande Prairie contribution is not included in that.
Great. Thank you for that. Councillor Thiessen.
Thank you very much, Mayor Clayton. Just a little context, between the County of Grande Prairie and the MD of Greenview last year, they contributed a total of $350,000 overall, so that puts the budget envelope at about just a little over $2 million total between all the regional partners. They also received $380,000 plus provincial funding on the per capita provincial funding as well. I do have a question, though, in regards to the county and the MD, and potentially what the Grande Prairie Public Library requested. Did they intimate any other asks that they may have put out there? Like, are they increasing their asks to the county and to the MD of Greenview? Is that $350,000 number hopeful to grow?
Ms. Cajolet.
Thank you. Through the chair, the library anticipates a 3% increase from their other municipal partners. So from for 2022, the combined revenue that they are expecting from the MD of Greenview and the County of Grande Prairie is just over $370,000.
Thank you for that.
Okay. Sorry. I'm gonna go back into time now. Now we keep getting these asks, and we keep holding the line on the Grande Prairie Public Library. Do we have any idea, Ms. Cajolet, on the percentage of the increased asks of the library to the county and the MD, and if they still follow that same 3% increase? And also, do we know if they were granted that from those out of this existing $350,000 number?
Ms. Cajolet.
Thank you, through the chair. I'm not able to confirm that they have received or will receive funding at that amount. The library received an increase in community group funding in 2019. So prior to 2019, they were funded at about a 1.62 level, and then in 2019, that was increased to 1.65, and then they would be maintaining that funding allocation for 2020 and 2021.
Okay, thank you. I don't know if I got the answer I needed for going in the back just on historical contributions and raises on the county and the MD, but I appreciate the perspective. Thank you, Stephanie.
All right, so no further comments or questions on the amendment. I'm just going to ask that we move on. So the amendment, as Councillor Friesen put out, would grant the library their operating requests of 1.96 approximately for 2022 and 2023. Sorry, Councillor Plott.
Sorry, I wasn't a question, more for administration again to earlier when I was asking if we're trying to hold a number here for budget purposes. Is the intent of anything going over on this going to be on the surpluses? I guess I'm still worried about setting a precedence that now we've set the library to this new number, And now we've set up the next council to say it's got to be there, and then we find out later on that we weren't underfunding our library compared to other libraries potentially, and that they weren't going to add hours. And so I'm wondering, is this going to be just an increase to operational expenses, or is this extra money coming out of reserves? I'm just, for clarification, I'm not sure how that amendment would work to know whether it's supported or not.
My understanding, there we go, Director Burke.
As the motion worded, there's no direction for us, so we'd be seeking some clarification whether this was an increase to the 2022 operating envelope or whether this would be from one-time funding. Just a reminder, as our CFO mentioned, that one-time operation funding from the reserves is not our recommendation, as that will be depleted quickly. If this motion was from reserves, that would be $655,000 just for those 2 years. So we would seek some clarification on what council's intent was.
Great. Okay, so I'm assuming everybody has their information they need in regards to the amendment, which would be to amend the amount from the recommended amount to 1.96. I will call the question.
May I have the opportunity to close?
Sure. Apologies. Councillor Friesen.
Thank you, Mayor Clayton. So to close on this, I want to comment on the idea that this funding needs to correlate with an increase in service. And this, where they're already where they've already had a drop in services, 5% drop in materials, 23% drop in public IT, and 13% drop in the programming budget. This budget maintains those, with that's maintaining what is already a reduction that they had to do last year. If we had given them this and it equated to a $200,000 surplus, that wouldn't have been a surplus. It would have been $200,000 that would have gone to not dropping public IT access by 23%, not dropping their materials budget by 5%. It wouldn't have equated to a surplus. So let's fund this to mitigate further reductions in service, which includes reduction of hours. This isn't talking about funding to add hours. We're talking about funding what's needed to maintain library access on weekends, for example. You know, I heard one of my colleagues say, well, what happened to charging for membership? I'm dismayed that my colleagues, many of whom were very excited about being able to put up an activity center that would allow low cost or no cost access to residents, turn around and say, oh, but you know what? Here we've got a low cost, no cost access to something like the library, and but let's start charging for it again. We either have our priorities in providing equitable services to in this example, where it comes to the library, it's the 56,534 active memberships in this library. I'm not sure of another organization in Grande Prairie that, regionally, that has that level of membership. Let's maintain access for these folks. Thank you.
All right, and that was the close. So I'll call the question.
Councillor Friesen, it's not recording your vote. Can you vote verbally for me, please?
I can. I did vote, but
sorry.
Sorry?
Just 1 minute. You may have registered now. There we go. So that is defeated. All right. So any other amendments which would be anybody that has a specific item within that bucket. All right, Councillor Bressie.
Thank you. I'm gonna try another motion relating to the library, and that would be the council amend the table to grant the library with $1,650,000 worth of funding in 2022 and 2023. And just to speak to that, I did support the last motion. Fair enough if you're not ready to increase the funding, but can we at least maintain the funding until we get more information? This is only an $18,000 ask, not a $3 million ask. But I think if we're saying we don't have enough information to increase the funding, we at least owe the library the respect of not reducing funding until we get that information we want. So I'd encourage council to support this amendment.
Comments or questions on that amendment? Councillor Plott.
Thanks, Mayor Clayton. I would have supported probably a number a little bit higher than that, Councillor Bressie, to be honest. I just didn't want to go all the way up to the top on that one. So I'm happy to support this motion. I do think it's fair to hold a line on them. And I do hope that we have a good conversation coming up with the library that makes us have a subsequent conversation where maybe we need to amend our funding and ask for more. But for now, I'm happy to support this motion.
All right. Any other comments or questions on that amendment? Oh, my screen just went blank. I'll see if we have any luck with this. There we go. Calling the question on that. To amend the table to allocate $1.65 million to the library for 2022 and 2023. Please vote. And that is carried unanimously. I'm just going to refresh my screen. If you'd give me a minute so the documents come back up. Okay. Thank you for that, your patience. Any other amendments? Councillor Thiessen.
Thank you, Mayor Clayton. I'm preparing to make a motion. I just need to get a little bit more understanding. Going back to the John Howard Society of Grande Prairie. So we're approving $30,146 is what the ask was. Part of that was for, I guess, the rental of the space, getting a bigger space. My understanding, and I'm going to be totally transparent, I sit on the board with the John Howard Society of Grande Prairie, but my understanding is part of this is programming, as was mentioned earlier by administration, for extra youth programming, a partnership with CBYF. I think also part of this, too, is to create a staff position in regards to working with the drug treatment courts. So I just need a little bit of clarity on that because I'm a big proponent of drug treatment courts, have been for over 5 years now since I first heard of the concept. If this were to move forward, I would rather empower an organization to be able to handle the volume of caseloads that's going to go through and provide that support for people heading into the court system or coming out of the drug court system and being able to follow through appropriately. So I guess I'm not sure if that's provincial dollars that could be coming forward, or part of it is to fund a position with the municipal dollars as part of an agreement. But I guess I just need a little more clarification because 30,000 seems like a really low number from a really big ask. And I know you got to shoot for the moon to land in the stars, but.
Thank you for that. Director Manuel?
Well, I can speak in regard to the drug court. My understanding is that along with the announcement of a drug court comes funding associated with the various programs to support it. And my understanding is also that an RFP would be issued in relation to that. I know that the John Howard Society provincially is involved in the project, so I'm not too sure what local impact that has right now. We have meetings coming up shortly here to obtain more details about that, but I have been told that funding dollars to support the local drug court will be in place. But I'm not sure how this position and ask aligns with that.
Okay. No, I appreciate that, Director Manuel. I guess my other question that would be for Ms. Sutherland, who just came on screen, I saw. That $29,000, what do we anticipate that that's going to support? Obviously not a staff position unless it's a pretty part-time staff position, or is this mainly going to other budgetary considerations in the John Howard budget?
Ms. Sutherland?
Through the chair. In my discussions with Ms. Mickenach, the plan for the ask here was to either look at topping up the opportunity for increased space, and the position that she was referring to was around that type of project manager position, as Ms. Cazalet had spoken of. So in our discussions, she was willing to. She seems quite flexible around that, and this position was intended to be a shorter-term position, so which is hence probably the next 2 years to help them get them off the ground around facilitating partnerships and talking about how to collaborate and work together with people in that co-located space. So this particular position she's asking for is not related to staffing with regards to drug treatment courts. I hope that answers your question, Councillor Thiessen.
Yeah, no, it did. Yeah, thank you.
Great, thank you for that. Any further comments or questions? Councillor Plott.
Thanks, Mayor Clayton. I'd like to make an amendment on the Grande Prairie Youth Shelter, please. I can appreciate that, you know, there's some we're trying to hold lines on stuff, but when I look at them hiring a full-time person, I want to really believe it's because they're going to have a surge of youth cases coming forward more than normal with COVID. I constantly hear horror stories about some of that stuff right now. So I want to fund them with their full amount of $130,000. They've added an extra position. I just think I see a lot of buckets on here where we're helping youth in different ways. This is the part of youth I really want to help the most that is in a spot we need to get to as much as possible. So I appreciate it went ahead and hired another body, but I'd like to amend that we're funding that to the full $130,000.
Okay. So that amendment is in order. Comments or questions on that amendment to fund the, can we vote on it on the table before we, sorry. Ms. Van Bleekveld, can you come on and explain that? Is there a current motion on the floor? Is that what you're indicating?
Yes, thank you, Mayor Clayton. We have committee recommend council approve the 2022-2023 operational funding as presented in Table 1 as amended, and we've done amending motions on that, but we haven't voted on that specific motion yet.
This amendment, Councillor Plott put forward as part of it, is another amendment to that.
To that table? I thought we were talking about table and not attachment. There's two different.
Yeah, there's attachment.
Yeah, but the youth group, and Ms. Cazalet, you can clarify, my understanding is the youth shelter group is part of the community group funding line, is it not? Which is part of the table.
I think they're attached to each other. So if we are increasing or decreasing any spending.
Thank you, Chair. So the allocations that are recommended in Attachment 1 do form the total line for community group funding in the table.
So I just want to clarify, if this were a pass, when we re-vote on that table, the new number would just appear, that we'd recalculate the number that we'd be approving with any of the subsequent amendments we make around specific funds.
Yeah, so my understanding, Ms. Cazalet, by amending the motions, which are basically the items within the operating grant allocations, we're just amending the overall table, but it's still part of it. So this amendment is in order to be part of that overall amended motion. We could have done them separately, but it's still inclusive of that.
That's your piece.
Mayor Clayton, if I may, I just would like to, just a quick, I just need confirmation from Councillor Platt with the funding request for $130,000. That's for 22 and 23, like right across the board.
Sorry, I'm just going to say it for 22 for now. I think you know, we'll see what happens in 23 and what funding looks like for them. But I think for now, it'd just be for 22 for me.
Okay. You put me in a tough spot because I was on board with you the whole way. I just think it's, for me, to attach funding for 1 year and then to rip it back, that could do a lot more damage than good. Like, of course, they're going to have that bonus, but we're going to create that expectation for the next year or an extreme disappointment. And I'd rather be consistent with this funding, especially with the youth shelter working towards getting a bigger space up on the map here in Grande Prairie, that they are going to need new positions for. So same thing, case in point, as we were discussing at the library earlier, I'd hate to give them a chunk of change and then take it back and then have to give them an even bigger chunk of change later so that they can actually run their operations efficiently and functionally, I guess, which is going to require staff. So I'm now on the fence with just funding for 2022. I think my preference would be to 2023 as well. If Councillor Palat is open to a friendly amendment, I would add 23 to that budget at 130.
Councillor Palat?
Thanks, Mayor Clayton, and thanks for that. The more I think about it, as I hear you, it would be awkward to get a program going and utilized and then us maybe not be in a spot to fund it. So I would amend that to be 22 and 23 funding.
Awesome. Thank you for that, Councillor Platt. For all the reasons mentioned, I will support his motion. Your motion.
The amendment to the community group funding overall amount, the amendment is to increase the youth shelter support to $130,000 for 2022 and 2023. Further comments or questions on that amendment? Councillor Bressie.
Thank you. No, I do support this. I think that it's the right thing to do now, supporting these youth, but also I think there are many community groups that actually reduce taxpayer funding, and this may be more than any other one. We spend a huge amount of taxpayer dollars at all levels of government addressing homelessness. We know that most people who find themselves living on the streets first do so when they're youth, and so if we can have intervention with youth when they first hit the streets, so that that's a short-term thing that doesn't dog them their entire adult life, that saves huge amounts of money for the city in the long term. So this for me isn't just about having something nice now for vulnerable residents that need it, although it very much is that. It also is a truly preventative decision that will reduce taxes in the long term and probably pretty dramatically, actually. So wholeheartedly support this.
Further comments or questions on the amendment? Councillor Plott, is this the close?
I was just going to say, if it's my close, Councillor Bress, you just nailed exactly what I wanted to say, so thanks for that.
That's carried unanimously. Any other amendments that anyone is looking for in regards to the overall amount for the community group funding? Councillor Bressie.
Great, thanks, Mayor Clayton. I've got one that's relatively small, but I think actually will have a big impact on our community. And that is that I would move that we amend the table to fund the Sport Connection with $108,000 in 2022 and 2023. And that's not meeting the request of going higher, which was just an inflationary request. That is holding the line for it. But to speak to this, I think that the Sport Connection is different in that, if you recall, a couple of years ago, we did a community audit of community resources here in Grande Prairie, and the overwhelming amount of our nonprofits here in town were sports. And in terms of residents' sense of well-being, sense of value, sense of belonging, overwhelmingly sport was seen as one of the primary factors for it. And I really do think that the Sport Connection is capacity building organization for these nonprofits that really are fundamental to our community. And I also know that it really is running at the bare bones already. Over the last couple of years, one staff position was let go. The other staff have had their salaries held where they are for years now, despite the fact that they're doing more work. The Sport Connection has moved offices to reduce costs there. It truly is a bare bones organization right now. And if more funding is cut from it, that will mean that less is being done to support coaches and other nonprofits in our community. I also highlight that this is an organization that probably actually would have capacity to fundraise if it had to. However, it does significant help to other organizations fundraising. I know I'm hosting a provincial tournament right now, and a lot of our fundraising success is from the Sport Connection. And I know my organization that I volunteer with isn't unique there. And I do worry that if we ask the Sport Connection to go out and make up our funds with fundraising, that it's competing against its clients for limited dollars in that sphere. So I think it's a capacity building organization that it makes sense to not ask it to do a substantial amount of private fundraising, since it's supporting other organizations in raising funds. So I'd encourage council to hold the line on its funding.
Comments or questions on that amendment? Seeing none, I'll call the question. That's carried unanimously. A question for Councillor Plott. I think you had asked the question for Ms. Cajolet on the Coalition for Safer Alberta Roads. Did you get the answer you wanted from that? I don't recall if Ms. Cajolet got back to you on that one.
I was going to circle back to that, but I've seen a few other hands up, so I'll just wait in the queue for that one.
Okay. And I see Ms. Lee is also on, so.
So, yeah, if you want me to address it now, I guess if there's just further information, because I was looking at maybe amending this motion to 0. I remember being excited about it when they first came, but I more and more feel that the advocacy our city council should be doing should be far away whether we're part of this coalition, but I just want to make sure I'm not missing something that isn't beyond advocacy on that.
Thank you, through the chair. I would actually invite Ms. Lee to speak to that.
Thank you. Through the mayor, the coalition over the last number of years, initially they were really focused on the advocacy, but that forms just one piece of their overall approach to road safety. Advocacy, in particular advocacy for the twinning of Highway 40 was a main priority. They've also looked at advocacy around adjustment to traffic flows in the Fox Creek area. They've really been focused on the 40-43 corridor through our larger economic region. The other major pieces that they've been shifting on and growing their outreach through would be driver awareness and driver education. They've rolled out some fairly effective marketing and communication campaigns targeting a lot of the workers, not only the local residents, but also workers that come to the area for to fill regional positions within the oil field, and really targeting in on some of those higher incident rate demographics and some of the known issues that we have in terms of speed and driver behavior on our regional highways. They've also partnered with regional municipalities as well as the RCMP on driver reward campaigns. So similar to like traffic stops that you see at Christmas time, they're doing traffic stops and rewarding good behaviors, focusing around the holiday season as well as long weekends. So designated drivers, or drivers obeying traffic laws and staying within speed limits and things like that. They have a number of different education pieces targeting the drivers, as well as municipalities and other municipal and provincial government partners. They are working on a new initiative. So there's a company out of the US. It's a little bit detailed or technical, so apologies, but in sort of brief summary, they're working with a US company to provide data analysis and overlaying it with anecdotal data to give us a really, really refined look at driver behavior and the causes of the accidents happening on the roads within our region. And the funding that is being requested today would go towards a case study that would be applied towards looking at the city specifically. So they've started on these case studies with other regional municipal partners, and this would be looking to do the study within the city, and then sort of the other piece of that funding would be increasing some of that campaign and driver awareness and their activities focused on driver education directly within the city.
Okay, thank you for that. Think about that one for a bit.
All right, Councillor Thiessen.
Thank you, Mayor Clayton. I'd like to make an amendment to the attachment and overall table in regards to the Prairie Gallery Society. They had an ask of $335,000 last year. We gave them $303,000. Similar to the library, I'm going to make this motion that we hold the funding of our 2019 contribution. So I would move to amend our 2022 and 2023 recommendations to be at the same level as 2021 operating, which is a $303,000 contribution. And speaking to this, the Prairie Art Gallery has come to us, it seems like ad nauseum over the last few months, telling us how great the services are, and they are really great as far as not only giving a nice cultural space for our citizens to enjoy, but also to attract professionals and other people around and really put us on the national map when it comes to getting certain exhibits put up in the gallery there. I think Jeff and his team have done a phenomenal job of enhancing the cultural integrity of our entire core, and they're big players on lots of boards, including the Downtown Association. And with other community groups as well. They integrate well with the other arts organizations, such as the Center for Creative Arts, and I think they're a leader. And if we're going to fund the library right up to what the 2019 ask was, I think we should treat all of our partners in the Montrose Cultural Center similarly, and at least not take away money that they used to be granted. So for all those reasons, I would hope that Council would support this motion. Thank you.
Comments or questions on the amendment? Councillor Friesen.
Thank you. Thank you for this, Councillor Thiessen. I was actually working on something here, and in my zeal to do this, I got all mucked up in the per capita, which was probably a happy accident because that was important for them to access other grants as well. But my understanding here is that 30,000 of this ask was really to mount some shows for recovery in the new year. So I think it was 7 to 10 shows at 3,000 each, which is, it gives us about that 30,000. And I'm not sure that this goes quite far enough. I would support this, but I can either amend and with also granting 30,000 out of reserves, or I can wait and follow up with that. Councillor Thiessen, what do you think of that amendment and your chances on passing this motion?
I'm open to any friendly amendments. I love the gallery. I love the library. I love everything that's in the Montrose Cultural Center, and leave it up for debate. But I think that $303,000 should at least be the bar.
Okay, so that amendment.
I'll support an amendment, though.
Well, if you're going to take a friendly amendment, then that's fine. But we're not going to amend amendment.
Yeah. So I guess. If you want to accept that friendly amendment of at least for 2022 to fund, as your motion states, plus 30,000 from reserves, and that still takes them up to just under what their ask was by $2,000.
I'll suggest that's a bit more than a friendly amendment because it includes a funding source. So, right?
And I'll follow that.
Yeah. Councillor Thiessen.
No, I was just going to say the same thing, Mayor Clayton, that I thought we could do that with the one-time funding hit as a follow-up subsequent motion. So,
Okay. So currently the amendment that is in order is to grant the Peace Gallery Society the $303,000 as received in 2021. Comments or questions on that? Councillor Plott.
Thanks, Mayor Clayton. Just kind of, is this for 22 and 23 or just 22?
Just 22 was indicated. No, for both? Okay, for both.
Yeah, it was for both. I think Councillor Friesen's subsequent motion will be to add to the 2022 from reserves, but my motion was for 2022 and 2023.
Great. Seeing no further comments or questions on the amendment, I'll call the question.
Mayor Clayton, I might be holding this up. I've got eScribe frozen, so I'm going to log out and log in. But would you like me to vote orally?
Yes, please.
I'm in favor.
Thank you for that. Ms. Van, do you have everyone else, Ms. Van Vlietveld?
As of right now, it's only showing me votes for Councillors Palat, Bressie, and Thiessen.
All right, so the voting actually didn't pop up on my screen either, so let's just vote with our hands on this one. So on the amendment, I'll call the question. How do you vote? Those in favor? Sorry, apologies, I voted incorrectly. Let's do that again. I'll call the question. Those in favor? And I don't see Councillor Minhas, so opposed. Be noted as opposed. Any other, sorry, Councillor Friesen, I think you had another item of business there you wanted to address in regards to the Prairie Gallery?
I did, but should this follow?
It can come later. Yeah, let's.
This motion,
for sure.
yeah.
You bet.
We'll have this.
Perfect. Any other amendments to the line items that are in the table amount for community group funding? Okay. Councillor Bressie.
Yeah, thanks. I was waiting to see if anybody had any 2022 ones, because I've actually got one for 2023, and that is, I would move that council amend all the 2023 amounts to show 1.4 increase over 2022. And the intention of this is if we don't keep funding up with inflation, it really is a real cut on the services these organizations can hit in the community. And I know that we're constrained by the budget targets we're hoping to accomplish as a council in the city, but I think we've been pretty clear as a council that our goal seems to be to keep up with inflation with our tax dollars. I think if we're okay doing our own operations with an inflationary increase, it makes sense to not expect our partners to do more than us. I'd also note that this is the lower end of inflation. Inflation probably actually will be higher than 1.4, but just to maybe make this a bit more palatable, I picked 1.4 because it's the lower side of what's projected for inflation to be. So I hope the council will support this. One thing I do want to highlight, just so everybody's aware, is there is one organization that this would actually be a reduction in funding over recommendations in 2023, and that's the Grande Prairie Tourism Association. My intention is that they would just get the 1.4% increase along with everybody else, not that over and beyond increase. They do good work, but I don't see a reason to give them a big bump in 2023 if we're not giving anybody else a bump in 2023. So please do this so that our community partners can continue to keep their same level of service as their costs increase.
So just to clarify, your intent is 1.4 over the amounts that are approved today for 2022.
So yeah, for everything in 2022, to just do a formula so that in 2023 they get 1.4. And sorry, just for a bit more clarity, I'm talking about the core group funding. We've got some organizations that are only getting funding in 2022. My intention is the ones that we're saying are getting 2023 funding, that they get that inflationary increase.
Okay, Ms. Whiteway.
Thank you, Mayor Clayton. And just to clarify, this is just on those organizations within community group funding, not the table within the report, just the attachment. Okay.
Yes, that is correct.
Thank you.
All right. Comments or questions on that amendment? Seeing no one jump in here, I can't support this motion. I think that it's reasonable for the next council to have these discussions based on what their budgetary goals are. So to foreclude that these organizations are going to get an increase, which may not be realistic after the next budget makes their budgetary decisions, I think may be a little bit misleading for them and hard for them to plan in reality. So to me, I would support as the recommendations are and let the next council make those decisions. Councillor O'Toole.
I was just trying to think how I was going to word it, and you started talking, and you said exactly kind of what I wanted to say. So I won't be supporting this motion.
All right. Any further comments or questions on the amendment? Councillor Bressie to close.
It's close. I mean, that's the whole point of this conversation we're having, and we're having 2-year funding so that we can give these organizations certainty, and so the next council doesn't have to worry about it in its first year. So regardless of if we give this or anything else, we are making a decision in the next council. By all means, I think most of these they probably could reverse if they wanted to, in a legal sense. Politically, maybe not, but we might get a council that gets in and says, "Hey, we want to reduce community group funding by 25%," and we're making that a lot more difficult for them. And that's kind of the point of a 2-year funding cycle. And so I just encourage council not to let that consideration get in the way of what are we tying the next council's hands to, because we're tying their hands regardless.
All right, call the question. Does anybody see the e-scribe vote? You do? Okay. Oh, there we go. Councillor Friesen?
Yeah, I still don't have the e-scribe vote. I'll go out and come back in, but I am in favor of this amendment.
Mayor Clayton, I still need votes from you and Councillor O'Toole.
I'm opposed.
Opposed.
Thank you.
And that motion is carried. That's what I see on the screen there. All right, Ms. Cajolet.
Thank you, Mayor Clayton. Administration is just seeking clarification on whether that 1.4 would apply to the adjustments already made for the library, youth shelter, sport connection, and Prairie Gallery Society.
Yeah, that was my intention with the motion, to change everything.
Thank you.
All right, so any other amendments? And if not, we're going to come to the, all right, Councillor Thiessen.
Thank you very much, Mayor Clayton. I'm prepared to make a motion. It seems like we're petering it out on the amendments, but I can hold off if there is another one.
If there's no more amendments, we do have an amended motion on the table.
Mm-hmm. All right, so I would move that council approve the 2022-2023 operational funding as amended in table 1.
Right, that motion's already there on the table.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, let's vote.
All right, perfect. So comments or questions on the amended motion? Seeing none, I'll call the question.
I'm slower than my roofers this last couple of weeks.
And again, I'm just waiting for votes from Mayor Clayton and Councillor O'Toole.
I'm in favor.
I'm sorry, Councillor O'Toole, I didn't hear yours.
I just tried it again, see if it works. Is it in?
No, it's not.
Yes, is my answer.
Councillor O'Toole votes in favor.
Hey.
That is passed unanimously. So any other business? Councillor Thiessen.
Thank you, Mayor Clayton. I would move that Council approve the 2022-2023 Community Group Funding Operating Grant allocations as amended in Attachment 1.
Perfect. Thank you for that. Comments or questions from Council? Seeing none, I'll call the question. Am I still not popping up? I vote in favor. Councillor O'Toole?
In favor.
Oh.
And that's carried unanimously. Any other business arising? Councillor Friesen?
I maybe should have snuck this in as an amendment there, but as I had indicated, I would like to move that we fund the art gallery $30,000 from reserve for 2022 in order to help meet their operational plans for recovery and reopening. To speak to this, part of what this request budget was about, this $30,000 specifically, was not, it was for 7 to 10 shows that they're hoping to have in 2022, but also really enhanced community engagement strategy through social media and other avenues. The art gallery has noticed that even as we were able to reopen over the course of this past year, their numbers were down of attendees, and this will help remind people to get back into that gallery and support what really is a world-class gallery.
All right. Ms. Whiteway.
Thank you, Mayor Clayton. May I just ask that the actual reserve that you wish to use be included in the amendment? So we do have that unallocated within the future expenditures reserve. It would just help if we had the name of the reserve that we will use to fund it.
And what would you suggest, Ms. Whiteway? What are the options? What would the recommendation be?
Thank you. So Council had 1.2 million as unallocated from the 2020 surplus within the future expenditures reserve. So I would recommend that that be where 30,000 comes from.
Thank you. Yep, the surplus was at 2020 surplus future expenditures.
All right, perfect. So that motion is in order to support $30,000 to the Prairie Gallery Society funded from the 2020 surplus in the unallocated reserves, unallocated restricted reserves. Comments or questions on that motion? Councillor Thiessen.
Thank you very much, Mayor Clayton. I'm really happy that Councillor Friesen popped forward this motion. I think a one-time cash injection will go a long way to not just reintroducing our community to the fine exhibits that are going on at the gallery, but the world-class exhibits are also going to draw in sponsors and other potential funders as well, and may affect the future bottom line going forward. If they can pick up more sponsors and have the opportunity for a fundraiser or two throughout the year and get that community and that culture rearing up in the Prairie Gallery again, I think it could go a long way to their future bottom lines. So I think this is a wise investment in programming dollars for the art gallery, and I want to thank Councillor Friesen for proposing it, and Ms. Waitway for wisdom in which reserve it's coming from.
Councillor Plott.
Thanks, Mayor Gibbon. I guess the only, and I want to support this, my only concern is, again, it's almost back to library to me, is if there would be a friendly amendment of the wording that this funding is to go specifically towards new events and activities. And again, for me, I just want to make sure that we're messaging this in our community, and we're going through a process that other user groups realize we see the value in this because they're going to do additional things next year with that money. If we're just giving an extra $30,000 without direction, I'm having a hard time with that. I want to support this, and so I would hope for a friendly amendment on that if it was possible, because I do want to support the cause of that.
Councillor Friesen.
Thank you. So we can amend it to include that this fund will go toward developing the exhibitions that will be launched this fall and into 2020. Sorry, guess that's too late then. The 2022 exhibitions, including public engagement and public programs associated with the exhibitions.
Councillor Thiessen.
Yeah, you know what? I can't get behind this amendment, and I really want to. I have full trust and faith in Jeff and the team that they're going to use this for recovery dollars, not just for the gallery, but to encourage recovery within the community. They did a lot over coronavirus with a little bit what they had as far as public engagement and all that other stuff, people being able to even walk in the gallery. I don't want to micromanage their operations and make things specific to this. I have total faith and trust that if we give them this money and they state it's for recovery and they understand it's a one-time injection, I think they're going to make the most of it. And I don't think we have to justify that to the community or other partners. Anything, you know what, every organization, if we attach, well, you need to do new programs, we're going to get an increased ask in from different organizations saying, hey, we're creating a program to get more funding. And I just don't want to go down that rabbit hole. I'm not saying it's going to be an abundant rabbit hole, but what I do want to say is, you know, we need to stay out of other people's business, and I don't know if we should have a stipend on this money here. So I can't support the motion. The amendment. I can support the motion, but just not this amendment. Thank you.
Councillor O'Toole.
I won't be supporting this motion.
Thank you. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, I just don't feel that it's right at this time.
Okay. Further comments or questions? Councillor Freeze, and I'll come back to you to close, okay? Councillor Plott.
Thanks, Mayor Clayton. I will support it with the amendment because, contrary to Councillor Thiessen, I think we have to safeguard extra funding. If we're literally taking this out of reserves to give to them. And so if we're taking out of reserves, fair enough. But I think optically, we have to tell our community why we chose to take money out of reserves and what additional value it brought the community, not we gave money. And Jeff and his team, again, full trust. But optically, I think we need to make sure that $30,000 is going to enhancements for specifically next year. And so I'd support it under that context, but if it was just $30,000 in additional funding, I would.
Right. Anyone else? Councillor Friesen.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Thiessen, for that comment. And I have full faith as well without this qualification on the allocation that the gallery would do the right things with this money. But I would like you to support it anyway. I have an email from Mr. Urbach that actually states that $30,000 enables us to develop these exhibits. And I think that I have no doubt that they will be able to do so with this $30,000 and still meet their other obligations for their operational requirements. So please, Councillor Thiessen, support this even with the amendment. And thank you, Councillor Platt, for your support. I encourage my colleagues to support the.
All right, I'll call the question on the motion.
Sorry, Mayor Clayton, just a point of clarification. We're voting on the amendment, not on the motion overall?
Apologies. On the amendment to prescribe what the motion, or what the $30,000 is for. Councillor Friesen.
Point of clarification. I thought that I amended my own motion.
Yeah, you are correct. It was a friendly amendment.
Yeah.
To her own motion.
And just to see, the motion as it is in the vote window.
Yeah.
If I can clarify that the 2022 exhibition, I don't want it to be limited to the exhibitions, but also to the promotion of those exhibitions.
So the motion as presented is for exhibitions and the promotion of those exhibitions. It indicates the funding source, and it's an all-inclusive motion. Perfect. All right. So we'll call the question on that motion.
Mayor Clayton, could you vote verbally for me, please?
Opposed. And that motion is carried. All right, any other business? Seeing none, I'll just double check with Ms. Cagelet. Is everything as Ms. Cagelet presented, or is everything covered now?
Mayor Clayton, administration would just ask for a brief recess, maybe a 5-minute break, just to confirm.
Yep, we've been going over an hour 45, so let's give it a 10-minute break. We'll come back at 11:56.
Thank you.
Ms. Cagelet, do you have you had enough time? Okay, perfect.
Through the chair, thank you. Administration is seeking clarification on just a couple of components. So the motion for the 1.4% increase over 2022 allocations, is it council's intent that that would also apply to the agreements, so for Peace Libraries and as well as the Community Wing at Centre 2000, or not those two categories?
Councilor Brassey.
Yeah, and I don't know if others had different intentions when they're voting on it, but my intention when I made the motion was that it wouldn't link to those agreements. Council doesn't really wade into those amounts. I saw those just informational pieces, that it was everything outside of the agreements.
Perfect. And administration is so just seeking clarification that the 1.4 would not apply to the categories of art development, pursuit of excellence, large-scale tourism, neighborhood associations, and community improvement funding.
And again, I don't know if others had different intents when we voted, but that was certainly my intent as the mover of the motion.
Yep.
Okay, perfect. And administration has what they need. Thank you.
All right. I'm just going to go back here. I'm frozen. But with that, the meeting is adjourned. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you very much. Take care.
Thanks, Paul.
Everyone.